The roar of 50,000 voices shattered the summer night sky. Birmingham's Alexander Stadium pulsed with electricity as Ozzy Osbourne prowled the stage like a caged panther finally unleashed. Smoke machines breathed dragon's breath across the crowd. Spotlights carved through darkness like divine judgment. The Prince of Darkness himself, 75 years old, but possessed by the spirit of every rebellious teenager who ever lived, gripped the microphone stand with hands that had held the world by its throat for 5 decades. "Birmingham!" His voice thundered through speakers powerful enough to wake the dead. "Are you ready to go crazy?" The response wasn't just sound. It was a physical force that rippled through the air, shaking the ground beneath 50,000 pairs of feet. But in Section 14, Row M, Seat 37, something else was happening. Something that would transform this concert from a legendary performance into a moment that would echo through eternity. Little Emma Richardson, 8 years old, clutched her homemade sign with trembling hands. The cardboard was covered in glitter and marker drawings of bats. So many bats. Because Emma had learned that Ozzy once bit the head off a bat on stage. And she thought that was the most rock and roll thing she'd ever heard. But the words written in her mother's neat handwriting said something that would stop the world. Ozzy, my last concert. Stage 4. Make it magical. Her father Marcus held her close, his eyes already glistening with tears he refused to let fall. Her mother, Sarah, stood on her other side, filming everything on her phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. They'd spent their life savings to get here. Front section tickets, the hotel, the trip from Manchester. The doctors had given Emma 3 months. That was 2 months ago. But tonight Emma was alive. Tonight Emma was at an Ozzy concert. Tonight Emma was home. Crazy Train detonated across the stadium like a nuclear bomb of pure sound. Emma's whole body vibrated with the bass, her bald head, smooth from chemotherapy, decorated with temporary bat tattoos, bobbed to the rhythm. Despite everything, despite the cancer eating through her small body, despite the pain medication that made the world fuzzy at the edges, Emma was smiling, she was singing. Aya. Marcus noticed the security guard first. The man was speaking urgently into his radio, his eyes locked on Emma's sign. Marcus's heart clenched. Were they in trouble? Had they broken some rule? Would they be asked to leave? But then the security guard did something unexpected. He smiled. He gave a thumbs up. He spoke into his radio again, more urgently now, pointing directly at Emma. What was happening? On stage, Ozzy was in his element, hitting notes that a man his age had no business hitting, moving with an energy that defied every doctor who'd ever told him he should be dead by now. The man was a medical miracle. Decades of substance abuse that should have killed him 10 times over. But here he was, still standing, still performing, still proving that rock and roll doesn't die. His longtime guitarist, Zakk Wylde, was beside him, fingers flying across the fretboard like lightning given human form. The rhythm section pounded out heartbeats for 50,000 people who had forgotten their own. This was transcendence. This was church for the faithless. But then something happened that nobody, not the band, not the crew, not a single soul in that stadium, expected. The music stopped. Not a gentle fade. Not a planned pause, just stopped, mid-song. The sudden silence was so complete, so absolute, that it felt like the universe had hiccuped. 50,000 people gasped as one. What was wrong? Technical difficulty, medical emergency. Was Ozzy okay? The Prince of Darkness stood center stage, one hand shielding his eyes from the stage lights, squinting out into the crowd. His signature round sunglasses were off. He'd taken them off, which he almost never did during a performance. He was looking for something. Someone. Stop. 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 Ozzy's voice came through the speakers, quieter now, confused. Someone. Someone tell me what I'm supposed to be seeing here. His manager, his wife Sharon, climbed onto the stage from the wings. The entire stadium watched as she whispered something in Ozzy's ear, pointing towards Section 14. Ozzy squinted harder. His face, that famous face, worn by years of excess and survival, transformed. First confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like heartbreak. There's a little girl out there, Ozzy said slowly, his Birmingham accent thick with emotion. And she's holding a sign. The crowd remained silent. 50,000 people held their breath. And it says, Ozzy paused, his voice cracking. It says this is her last concert. A collective gasp rippled through the stadium. Phone cameras turned toward Section 14. The massive screens flanking the stage, which moments ago had shown Ozzy in all his glory, now showed Emma, tiny, bald, brave Emma, holding her glitter-covered sign. The entire world was looking at her now. Emma's eyes went wide. Her mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. On the screen she looked even smaller, more fragile, more impossibly courageous. Marcus felt his legs weaken. Sarah couldn't stop crying. Their daughter, their beautiful dying daughter, was on the screen at an Ozzy Osbourne concert. "What's your name, darling?" Ozzy asked, his hand cupped over his eyes, trying to see her better. The security guard rushed to Emma with a microphone. Marcus lifted her up so she could reach it. Her small voice, amplified across the stadium, trembled but didn't break. "Emma Richardson. I'm 8. I'm from Manchester." "Emma from Manchester," Ozzy repeated, and something in his voice made 50,000 hearts break simultaneously. "Emma, sweetheart, I need you to tell me something. What's your favorite Ozzy song?" Emma didn't hesitate even for a second. "See You on the Other Side," she said clearly, and the crowd made a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. It was the sound of 50,000 people realizing they were witnessing something sacred. That song, of all the songs she could have chosen. A song about death, about the afterlife, about promises made across the veil between worlds. A song about saying goodbye but not really saying goodbye at all. Ozzy stood silent for a long moment. Even the rowdiest, drunkest, most hardcore fans in the stadium were crying now. Grown men who'd been in mosh pits and riots, who'd broken bones and spilled blood in the name of rock and roll, had tears streaming down their faces. "Emma," Ozzy said finally, his voice strong again, filled with purpose. "I'm gonna sing that for you. But I'm not gonna sing it from up here." He turned to his road crew. "Get her backstage. Get her family backstage." "No, wait, better idea." Ozzy pointed directly at Emma. "Bring her up here, bring her on stage." The stadium repeated. The roar was deafening, primal. A sound of pure human emotion unleashed. Security guards materialized around Emma and her family. Marcus tried to speak, to ask if this was real, but his voice wouldn't work. Sarah was openly sobbing. Emma looked like she'd been hit with a bolt of lightning, shocked, terrified, exhilarated, all at once. They were escorted through the crowd, through passages that wound behind the stage, through areas where roadies and technicians scrambled to make this impossible moment happen. Emma clutched her father's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her mother kept asking, "Is this real? Is this really happening?" And then they were climbing stairs, real stairs, onto a real stage, where Ozzy Osbourne, Ozzy Osbourne, stood waiting with a smile that transformed his face from the Prince of Darkness into something gentler, something grandfather, like something impossibly kind. The moment Emma stepped into the stage lights, the crowd went absolutely nuclear. 50,000 people screaming her name. "Am I? Am I?" The chant built and built until it seemed like the sky itself was shouting her name. She stood there, tiny under the massive lights, overwhelmed, scared, brave, alive. Ozzy knelt down, actually got down on his knees, so he could look Emma in the eye. He took off his leather jacket, the one covered in patches and studs, the one that probably cost more than most people's cars, and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her completely, hanging down to her ankles. She looked like a child playing dress up in her father's clothes. "You look properly rock and roll now," Ozzy said, and Emma giggled, actually giggled. And that sound, transmitted through the speakers to 50,000 people, made the world feel less dark for just a moment. "Now, Emma," Ozzy continued, standing up, keeping one hand on her shoulder to steady her. "I'm going to sing See You on the Other Side for you. But I need you to help me, all right? When we get to the chorus, I need you to sing it with me. Can you do that?" Emma nodded so hard her head looked like it might fall off. Zakk Wylde began the opening notes, soft, acoustic, haunting. The song started as a whisper, a prayer, a promise made in the dark. Ozzy's voice, worn by decades of screaming into microphones but still powerful, still real, filled the stadium with words about endings and new beginnings. Marcus and Sarah stood just off stage, holding each other, watching their daughter stand beside one of rock's greatest legends. Every parent's nightmare and dream colliding in one impossible moment. Their daughter was dying. Their daughter was living more in this single moment than some people lived in entire lifetimes. The first verse washed over the crowd like a wave. 50,000 people swayed as one. Phone cameras created a constellation of lights in the darkness. Everyone was filming, but everyone was also present, also TARE, also part of this moment that would never come again. Then the chorus approached. Ozzy turned to Emma, held the microphone between them, and together, a rock legend and a dying child, they sang, "See You on the Other Side." Emma's voice was thin, weak from illness, but it was tar, it was real. It rang out across Birmingham's Alexander Stadium with more power than all the amplifiers in the world could generate. Because it wasn't just a voice. It was a statement. It was defiance. It was a little girl telling death itself that she wasn't afraid. The crowd sang with them. 50,000 voices joining Emma's, lifting her up, carrying her across every finish line that mattered. Strangers who'd never met Emma, who'd never meet her, who would spend the rest of their lives thinking about this night, sang for her, sang with her, sang because of her. Halfway through the song, Emma's knees buckled. Marcus surged forward, but Ozzy was faster. The Prince of Darkness caught Emma, scooped her up in his arms like she weighed nothing, and kept singing while holding this dying child against his chest, this brave little girl who'd used her last wish to come to his concert. Emma wrapped her thin arms around Ozzy's neck and sang into his microphone, her face pressed against his. Two souls from completely different worlds, connected by music, by mortality, by the shared human experience of staring into the void and deciding to sing anyway. The song built to its climax, the guitars soared, the drums thundered, and in the center of it all, Ozzy Osbourne held Emma Richardson and sang about the other side, about seeing each other again, about how love doesn't end just because life does. When the final note rang out, the silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the stadium exploded. It wasn't applause, it was something bigger, something that transcended sound and became pure emotion made manifest. People were openly weeping, screaming, hugging strangers, having religious experiences in a place that had nothing to do with religion and everything to do with the divine. Ozzy carried Emma to center stage and addressed the crowd one more time. "I've been doing this for over 50 years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've played for millions of people. I've done things I shouldn't have survived. I've lived 10 lifetimes. But tonight, test night, this is the most important show I've ever played." He looked down at Emma, who was still wrapped in his jacket, looking up at him with eyes full of wonder and life and everything good that exists in the world. "Emma, I want you to have this jacket. And I want you to have something else." He unclasped one of his necklaces, a simple silver cross that he'd worn for decades. "This was given to me by someone I loved very much, and now I'm giving it to you, because you, darling girl, are rock and roll. You are brave, you are strong, and you are loved." He fastened the necklace around Emma's tiny neck. She touched it with trembling fingers, unable to speak, unable to process that any of this was real. "The world is going to know your name," Ozzy continued, speaking to Emma but addressing the entire stadium. "Everyone here tonight is going to remember you. They're going to tell their children about you. Their grandchildren. They're going to tell them about the night a little girl from Manchester taught Ozzy Osbourne what courage really looks like." Marcus and Sarah were brought on stage. The family stood together under the lights. A father trying to be strong, a mother who'd cried all her tears and found new ones anyway, and a daughter who glowed like a star. Ozzy embraced them all. This family of strangers who'd given him a gift he didn't know he needed. "Thank you." Sarah managed to whisper to him. "Thank you for making her last concert magical." "Last concert?" Ozzy shook his head firmly. "No, love. This isn't her last concert. This is her best concert. And whenever she's ready for another one, she's got lifetime backstage passes to any show I ever play. You hear me, Emma? You come back anytime, the door's always open." The crowd roared its approval. Medical impossibility or not, in that moment, everyone chose to believe. Everyone chose hope. As Emma and her family were escorted offstage, the band launched into Bark at the Moon with renewed fury. But everyone in that stadium knew that the real show was over. Everything else was just music. What they'd witnessed was transcendence. Backstage, in the private area reserved for VPs and special guests, Emma sat on a couch that swallowed her whole. She was still wearing Ozzy's jacket, still touching the necklace, still processing the fact that the last 30 minutes had actually happened. Her parents sat on either side of her, anchoring her to reality. A parade of rock legends came to meet her. Band members, crew members, people who'd been in the industry for decades and thought they'd seen everything. Each one shook her hand, high-fived her, told her she was the coolest person they'd ever met. She collected autographs and stories and moments that would fill whatever time she had left with light. Sharon Osbourne, Ozzy's wife and longtime manager, sat down with the Richardson family. She'd seen her husband through overdoses and reality TV shows, through comebacks and crashes, but she'd never seen him do anything quite like what he'd just done. "He's been different since he saw your sign," Sharon told them. "Sometimes I forget, we all forget, why we do this, why music matters." Tonight Emma reminded us, before they left. Ozzy came to say goodbye. He was tired now, the adrenaline wearing off, looking every one of his 75 years. But when he saw Emma, he smiled that same gentle smile and knelt down one more time. "Emma, I need you to do something for me," he said seriously. "Anything," Emma whispered. "I need you to fight. Fight as hard as you can. Fight like you're in the craziest mosh pit in the world. Because the world needs more people like you in it. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded. I'll try. That's my girl. Ozzy kissed her forehead. And remember, I'll see you on the other side, whenever that is. Could be 70 years from now when you're an old lady who tells her great-grandchildren about the time she sang with Ozzy, or it could be sooner. But either way, I'll be waiting. And we'll do this all again. The Richardson family left the stadium at midnight. Emma was asleep in her father's arms, clutching a set list that every band member had signed, wearing a jacket worth thousands of pounds and a necklace worth more than money could measure. Her parents walked in silence, both processing what had happened, both knowing their daughter's story had changed tonight. The next morning, the footage was everywhere. Every news station, every social media platform, every corner of the internet was talking about the Ozzy concert miracle. The video of Emma and Ozzy singing together had been viewed millions of times. The world was crying for a little girl they'd never met, praying for a miracle they didn't know if they believed in. Emma lived for 7 more months, long enough to see herself become famous, long enough to receive letters from children with cancer all over the world, telling her she gave them courage. Long enough to meet Ozzy 2 more times, once when he visited her in the hospital, once when her family was invited to his home for Christmas. When Emma Richardson finally passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in March, surrounded by family and love and music, the world mourned. But they also celebrated. Because Emma hadn't just died. She'd lived, she'd shown the world what it meant to be brave. She'd reminded everyone that life isn't about how long you exist, but about how brightly you burn while you're here. At Emma's funeral, played through speakers borrowed from a local concert hall, was "See You on the Other Side." Everyone sang along, everyone cried, everyone remembered. Ozzy Osbourne didn't attend the funeral. He was touring in Australia, but he sent a message that was read aloud. Emma taught me something I'd forgotten after 50 years in this business. She reminded me that music isn't about the spectacle or the fame or the legend. It's about connection. It's about being human together. It's about looking into the darkness and deciding to sing anyway. I'll carry that little girl with me for the rest of my life, and I'll see her again. On the other side, where all the lights are bright and all the concerts last forever. So here's the question I need you to answer. If you had one last wish, one final moment to make magical before everything ended, what would it be? Who would you want to share it with? What song would you want the world to remember you by? Think about it. Because Emma knew her answer. And because of that, 50,000 people will never forget her name. What will your answer be?